And let's see if we can't finish this, the 10th chapter of The Pearl of the Soul of the World, which is called Winterock. Ariel is riding on the back of a giant frog, a mudlink, to the palace of the Lorelei. She says she has a message from Ravenna. And the toad, which is what the mudlink is explaining to her that once the palace was all underground or underwater, but now it's so big that it doesn't fit underwater anymore. One eye swiveled to look at her. Ariel managed to glare back. As the mudlink brought her to the edge of the crystal keep, Ariel scrambled off in relief, into a narrow terrace a few inches above the surface. To her astonishment, she found the ledge was cold, far colder than the mudlink's skin. Glass smooth. It was so chill, the soles of her feet adhered to it. Uneasily, she shifted from foot to foot. What stone, what jewel had been used to make this tower? The pearl upon her brow brightened, suffusing with her warmth. "Well, little sorceress," boomed the mudlick, "I have brought you here. Now enter if you can." With a final deep laugh, it sank from sight below the surface of the mirror. Nightshade was very late. From the tilt of the stars, she saw that it must be nearly solstice. She shifted her feet once more to keep the soles from binding to the stone. If not for the pearl, she realized, the cold would have been unbearable. Gazing up at the blank, unbroken white walls of the palace, she began to walk along the landing, searching for a door. She walked until she felt dizzy, her neck stiff. But she could find no window, no portal, no chink or opening. At last she stopped, baffled and exhausted. Desperation ate at her. Somehow she must get in. She had not come all this way to be turned back now. Ariel felt an odd stirring in the back of her mind, a low, unintelligible murmuring. "Place your hand against the stone," it seemed to whisper, so softly that in the next instant she was not even sure it had spoken at all. Nevertheless, she placed one palm against the frigid surface, gingerly, lest it stick. Nothing happened. Frustration welled in her. She pressed harder, heedless now, throwing her whole weight against the keep. "Open," she cried silently, angrily. "Let me in." The stone surface beneath her hand abruptly vanished. Ariel stumbled forward. Catching her balance, she spun around to behold the outer wall now parted in a broad archway. Pearl light gleamed on the clear white crystal of the palace interior. Ariel touched the jewel upon her brow again, astonished. Even as she watched, the walls seemed soundlessly together once more, forestalling retreat. She stood in a deserted hallway. Starlight filtered through the crystalline walls. Despite the pearl's warmth, she was shivering hard. The fierce cold of the witch's keep numbed her. Her breath came in gasps, swirling up in puffs like scentless smoke. Something told her she would be well enough as long as she kept moving. Though the pearl's power was great, it was subtle. She must not pause, must not rest. Ariel started down the long, empty hall. The walls around her were uneven but smooth, in some places nearly transparent. Sometimes she sensed she was passing along the outer wall of the keep to what lay beyond, and what lay beyond was open sky. It must be nearing solstice by now, she knew. Her breath, when she leaned closer, seeking to peer beyond the ripples, fogged the crystal stone. Once she brushed against it in passing. The dry cold adhered to her like something tacky and alive. She had to snatch her arm away. Her path led mostly downward at first, so that after a time she was certain she had passed below the waterline. The stone of the wall was clearer here. Beyond, the dark waters of the mere moved sluggishly. A flock of hatchet-shaped swimming things darted past, their huge mouths gaping. Something long and gray slid after them, doubling back on itself. It snapped blade-like teeth at her. Ariel jumped farther out. Something much vaster circled, very black, one of the witch's marigwints, a water dragon. Ariel hastened on. Journeying deeper, she passed through mazes of corridors with faceted walls, each throwing her image back at her until she halted, baffled, scarcely able to tell where her own form ended and her reflection began. Always the pearl guided her onward and through. Once at a juncture of two hallways, she sensed that if she had taken the other fork, It would have led invisibility down to where the captured Duros labored, deep in the palace bowels, beneath even the mud bottom of the mere. Many rooms flanked the corridor, all empty now. Unbidden, the Pearl's sight revealed to her more than she wanted to know about the past of those deserted chambers. Here the witch's black birds had flocked. There she had built her dark angel's wings, and in another gilded their hearts with lead. The Pearl observed the palace's memories with relentless dispassion. Shuddering, the pale girl covered her face with her hands. How could any mortal being have become so corrupt? Could anyone capable of such evil ever be redeemed? What might the pearl of the soul of the world become in the hands of such a one? And yet, she remembered the ancient words, "She is my daughter still." Ariel came to a room which halted her. Without looking, she sensed what lay beyond the door, a siege as white as salt, such as a queen might sit enthroned upon. The Pearl imparted to her a glimpse from the chamber's past. The young Irilaf, not yet a dark angel, brought to his knees before that siege, a silver chain encircling his wrist, so grasped in the hand of the tall, seated woman before him. She leaned forward, her face bowed from view. Her other hand was a fist in the young man's hair. Cruelly, she forced his head back, bending to whisper in his ear, "Yes, love, you will." Ariel cried out. The sound shivered down the length of the empty hall, rebounding and magnifying into a louder and louder shriek, until it seemed that no one voice but many screamed. Ariel ducked, covering her ears. She had no idea of the context of the scene, what had happened before it or followed after, and little cared. Her attention remained fixed on the horror of a single point in time, the young Irilaf defying his mistress, and the White Witch slowly, inexorably, relishing every moment of it, breaking him to her will. Ariel gasped for a breath and bit off her cries. "No," she told herself sternly, "no!" The glimpse which the Pearl had brought her came from the past. It was not happening now. Half breathless, she uncovered her ears and heard many blade-thin echoes dying. "Love," she whispered, remembering the Lorelei's words to Irilaf. Shaking, Ariel gazed about her at the cold white walls. Nothing in this frozen place has anything to do with love. Grimly, she padded forward. The path wound on and on, sometimes downwards, sometimes level. Eventually, she began to travel upward again. It must be long past Solstar rise, she realized. No longer night outside. No inkling of dawn reached her before, but the light was much brighter, since she had once more risen above the dark waterline. She had the sense of being far higher now than when she had entered the palace. How long have I been wandering here, she wondered. A broad, straight corridor stretched before her. She halted, trembling, dimly aware, suddenly, of what lay ahead of her and not wanting to go on. She stood a long time, reaching out through the senses of the Pearl, trying desperately to find another path to no avail. Here lay the only path. Ariel drew a ragged breath. Quickly, she found herself ahead down the long corridor. Quickly, she forced herself ahead down the long corridor. Human figures stood, embedded in the walls, on either side of her. None of them moved, still as stone every one, caught fast in the indescribably cold crystal. Their eyes were all closed, all their limbs and faces frozen in attitudes of horror, struggle, revulsion, and despair. And yet, even so, the Pearl told her, they were alive. Were they even physical bodies at all, or were they souls captured by the witch and her dark angels but not yet devoured? Unnerved, Ariel ran on. The corridor ended in an open archway. A blaze of soul starlight lay beyond. She saw a window unshuttered, unglazed. The wind blowing in off the waste was stiff, made thin by altitude. Panting, her breath swirling in clouds, Ariel halted in the wash of sunlight streaming in. Its warmth felt delicious. She savored it. The lateness of the hour outside dismayed her. Solstar hung low. She had entered the witch's keep before dawn. "There you are," said a cold, clear voice. It rang like crystal, like a bell, like a dark angel's voice, rich, compelling, clear. At last, well through my palace of Winterock. It is not always easy to find one's way. Winterock. Ariel could not tell if the word named the palace itself or the frigid stone from which it was formed. The speaker laughed, deeply, languidly. But I never doubted you would find me, little sorceress. And that is the end of chapter 10.